Okay, so this is basically about the, I guess, sort of the pointlessness of being an environmentalist or being a conservationist. You see, it's already over. In fact, it was probably over before we even had a chance to save it. By that I mean civilization. Um, civilizations fail. They always fail. This civilization has got quite complex. It's due for a failure. Just like the Roman Empire failed, just like every other empire failed, this empire will fail. Now, why it'll fail? Probably a combination of wealth inequality, disastrous, dangerous climate change that's on the way, and scarcity of resources eventually, relatively soon. Maybe it'll be water, maybe it'll be oil. But it's just stupid, really, to care anymore. I send these emails as a way to give myself a clean conscience, saying, I'll protect this natural area, protect this endangered species, label GMOs or, um, stop sonar testing in the waters or stop pollution, alternative fuels, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to matter. We are too many people on this planet, and the people who are wealthy want to stay wealthy, and they do that by keeping the system of capitalism that is continually ravaging our planet. Not really ravaging the planet, it's just attempting to remake the planet for human comfort, human enjoyment, with the total disregard to every other living species. And if I thought we could do it forever, or if we were on a planet that didn't have so much, other nature to worry about, then maybe I wouldn't care as much. But we're cutting down the rainforest, even still. I mean, it seems like they've been cutting down the rainforest forever. It's amazing there's still any rainforest left at this point. Um, More, species are just going endangered left and right. Um, Climate change to me is the big thing. I feel like it's pretty noticeable right now. I think the weather's pretty weird everywhere. But what's the point really? It's gonna fail eventually. All civilizations fail. So the problem with environmentalists is they just don't want to give up their way of life, and maybe also they don't acknowledge the fact that a lot of environmentalists do acknowledge this, but there's a lot of them who hold out hope that somehow you're going to be able to have a planet with 7 billion people on it that's going to be able to innovate their way out of problems, or that we won't have to make any major sacrifices. Most of the truth of the matter is, we cannot live the way we live in America, or the way people are starting to live in China, the upper class people anyway, and expect the world to continue operating this way. That's why I'm not having children. I wish I could have kids. But I don't want to bring a child into the world that is guaranteed to go south at some point. And my guess is it'll be in the next 40 to 50 years at least, minimum, maybe sooner. With wealth inequality as high as it is, I've already said that there should be, the historians expect a revolution at some point. Climate change is another major problem. Eventual scarcity of oil is going to eventually be a problem. Who knows when? Maybe another decade from now. But I don't want to be around and have to look at my child and say, hey, well, we were selfish. We wanted all the resources to ourselves. So you're just going to have to suffer. I'll probably have to suffer at some point too. I fully expect to feel the wrath of all this shit. When it goes bad, it's going to go bad in a big way. I mean, it may not happen instantaneously, or maybe it will. It's hard to say. Some people say it will happen fast, some people say it will happen slow, but one way or the other, there will be hell to pay for our stealing of the resources on this planet that were supposed to remain for future generations. We are living a life that is way too comfortable and way too convenient, and I'm sure the next generation will only have a small period of time to really enjoy it before it's taken away from them by the result of our wasteful, resource dwindling actions. So basically, what I'm saying is, what is the point of environmentalism at this point? I mean, we're past the point of no return. The rich have already shown that they're not willing to make the sacrifices necessary. The real problem falls mostly on rich people. I can only do so much. I could live out. What am I forced to do if I want to be a real environmentalist? I mean, recycling, that's bull. Recycling, they say downcycling. Plastic becomes unusable after you recycle it 2 or 3 times, and then it goes into a landfill, just like everything else. I drive a Prius. I'm still burning fossil fuels. They're still digging it out of the ground. I'm still adding, carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. What we need now is not to add less carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. We need to be removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, getting it back down to the levels it was at before we started this horrible experiment in climate change. What options do we have? It's like, what am I going to do? Live out in a field and, hunt for food? I mean, how do you afford the field if you have to work? The work requires you to emit fossil fuels. You got to drive to where you're working. If you're walking to where you're working or taking public transit, the public transit is still emitting fossil fuels. And let's say even if you do walk, what the business you do is probably utilizing resources in some way or another. If it's not really utilizing resources, it's generating money so that the people who work at the business can have money to buy resources that are then. So it's really, there's no escaping it unless you live in the forest, like a homesteader or something. And even then it's hard to escape because you have to be living the way the native peoples lived in order to not be wasting resources. And nobody lives like that anymore. They don't really give you that option. Capitalism doesn't want you living the simple, basic life. And nobody really wants to live that life anyway. It's a hard life. We've grown up with comforts, creature comforts that don't exist in that world. And I don't even know how to exist in that world. I've taken a survival class. I have a basic idea, but we're talking about building shelters out of, sticks and debris. I mean, that's where I'd be sleeping. I mean, I don't know. Some people really get into it, but most people, like me, don't want to live in a debris hut for the evening, or I shouldn't even say hut, debris shelter for the evening. Most people don't want to be eating raw foods and scavenging in the forest for mushrooms or cattail soup. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you got to do. It's ridiculous, that it's extremely difficult. Now, if I'd grown up with those techniques and I'd been doing it my whole life, then, I would have no problem with it. But, can we really take on all this guilt for living the way we lived, living the way we were brought up, raised, the way we were taught? It's like, how can we be guilty for all this? Things could have been done differently. We've had fuel cell technology for a long time, and they're just now coming out with fuel cell cars, and they're unaffordable. 60 grand in a world with income inequality. How am I supposed to afford a 60 grand car that doesn't pollute? Meanwhile, the manufacturer of the car still pollutes. So, there's that also. I mean, I think if everybody had a hydrogen car or electric car, then it wouldn't be as big of an issue, but that's just unrealistic. And that's what really it comes down to. In the world of capitalism, trying to live sustainably is expensive. And most people and businesses in this current system don't have the money to do it the right way. I'm sure businesses could save money by operating green, they would already be operating green. But environmentalists like to tell this ridiculous story that businesses can remain viable and be green and everything's going to be great. It's just stupid. Let's be honest. Capitalism is not choosing to live green. Capitalism is choosing to emit more fossil fuels and to burn more, put more carbon into the atmosphere. If it was viable, then we wouldn't be seeing that. If panels were affordable, then everybody would have them already. If wind power was more efficient, it would be wind installations everywhere instead of just here and there. You know if people really wanted to get around by train, we'd have a wide-reaching train system to get us around, high-speed train system to get us around America. I certainly would like to see a high-speed train system that could take you anywhere. But for whatever reason, people prefer cars, and I can't make the policy. When you go buy food, it's got all this plastic, this crappy plastic. Everything is packaged in plastic. We have no option to buy something that's 100% recyclable or reusable or biodegradable. That just doesn't exist. How can the average environmentalist expect to make any real difference? You just can't. Rich people have the power right now. I do think that's going to change, but the change is not going to be a smooth change, and there's going to be a long period of strife and really primitive living because it's taken a long time to build this society, to build the structure of the civilization. And everything is done in a wasteful way. And it's going to have to collapse and be rebuilt in the long term. And who knows how many people are going to survive the collapse. It's going to be a big collapse, and a lot of people are going to die. That's obvious to me. It should be obvious to anyone. Anytime a civilization collapses, a lot of people die. That's how the cycle goes. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know why I'm going to keep sending these emails. I feel like really when I send these emails, I'm just attempting to slow the pace of destruction of our capitalist civilization because it's just it's on its way. We can slow down the pace of destruction, but to stop it completely is going to require a totally new system that's not based on valuing money as the most important thing in the world, and we're nowhere close to that. Not until there's a revolution. And it's we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. We got a bad system. We're ruining the planet. But if we have a revolution, it's gonna be we're gonna go back to a much more primitive time, and it's gonna take a while before we can develop anything else. And who knows if other systems are even capable of developing anything like capitalism. We don't want exactly capitalism, obviously, but the innovations and um, the at least temporary prosperity that comes from capitalism will not be equaled by anything else because, as I've said in this video, the reason why we have so much prosperity now, and this is what conservatives really don't understand, they think, oh, innovation, hard work, that's what made this country great. What they don't realize is we're living off of resources that were supposed to remain for a much longer period of time for many more people to use. But we're hoarding them right now, and we're being gluttonous with our resources. We want it all now. We want all the best now. We want the biggest house now. We want the best food. We want everything we can suck out of the earth now. We want, regardless of the consequences to future generations. And that's what conservatives don't understand. They think, oh, everything's great now. It's been great before. It's going to continue to be great. But they have no sense of the big picture, and they don't understand, how bad it's going to get when the resources run out, and they are running out. Clean water is going to run out, and also the equilibrium of the environment. We're looking at huge sea level rises, and that's not the biggest issue from climate change, but sea level rises are locked in because the western Antarctic ice shelf is guaranteed going to slip off into the ocean. That's been proven scientifically at this point. A lot of people who are studying those things are extremely concerned about that, from what I've been hearing. And we've got the species are going to have a hard time adjusting to the rapid climate changes that are coming. The ice caps are melting. There's going to be feedback effects. It's not going to be as bad as some alarmist environmentalists make it sound, but I don't think we'll turn to Venus or anything, but it's going to be impossible for civilization to withstand the changes, and there's going to be uh, the land is going to be different. There's going to be mass exodus. Water is going to be harder to get to. Maybe there'll be droughts in some places. There'll be flooding in other places. You'll have more things like what's going on the East Coast. Tons of these crazy Arctic patterns moving south. The jet stream is being disrupted. I mean, I don't really know. This is all I'm kind of talking out of my ass on all these things, but this is what science is telling us, that things are going to go kind of haywire, and civilization is not going to be able to adapt to these things. It's incredible hubris to think that we can change the entire. Basically, yes, the Earth or the climate has always changed, but we are putting in a massive injection of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere that has only been equaled once in history, and that was done through, and it wasn't done as fast. Basically, it's a matter of how fast we're putting the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, because there was a time when there was a giant, I think Icelandic volcanoes that were spewing, or I think maybe it was, I can't remember if it was Siberian or Icelandic, but basically there were these long trench volcanoes that spewed a lot of nasty gases into the air, and that was the last time we had something like we had now. And I think about 90% of all species on Earth died, and those volcanoes were actually spewing crap into the atmosphere at a slower rate than we are now. I mean, if you look historically, the rate at which we've bumped up carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is never been, the speed at which it's being done has never been equaled. What's happening now is historically fast carbon dioxide production into the atmosphere. So, it's an experiment. Scientists are saying that they know it's going to cause chaos. They say there's a good chance we'll see 2 degrees of warming, you know, at some point within the next 100 years, and at that point everything's supposed to go haywire. So, anyway, enough gloom and doom talk. Basically, all I'm saying is, I think both sides have it wrong. Environmentalists think that things are going to be fine. There's this crazy optimism in environmental circles, when really environmentalists should be, if they really cared about the planet, they'd say, well, let's take down civilization and start again. And if they were serious about being environmentalists, then they'd say, well, we're going to have to lose 3 or 4 billion people in the revolution in order to make this happen. And I certainly don't want to see that. I like to consider myself an environmentalist, but the reality of the matter is, I'm just a guy who wants to survive in a relatively pleasant climate for as long as possible. And a revolution is not going to make that possible. I don't want to fight. I don't want to kill. I don't want to be shot at. I'm not a fighter. I'm not a soldier. Um, and it's like I say, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. At this point, it's either a complete revolution, a complete upending of civilization as we know it, or we get taken care of by the negative consequences of the rapacious use of resources that is part and parcel of capitalism. And I don't know, it was destined to happen anyway, but it's a shame we couldn't, that selfish greed of us, a certain group of people who feel entitled, that it's amazing, that it's sad that these people have such a hard time letting go of their self-image as more important than the rest of us, because they're wealthy, because they worked harder than we all did. But hard work, as I've said in another video, maybe the hard workers shouldn't be in charge, because of all this hard work, it's leading us to a faster, or devastation is going to come faster, thanks to all this hard work that all these leaders are putting in. Hard work means production, which means resource use. And for once, it'd be nice if the lazy people were able to make the rules. It's never going to happen because lazy people can't aren't going to be given power. You have to take power. And only the hard workers take power, and they're going to work us to death. Literally. They are working us to death, and they don't care because they think because they worked harder that they are entitled to do whatever they want with the world. And mostly they think that because they worked hard, they want what's coming to them, and what's coming to them in their minds is an abundance of resources. But what they don't realize is you cannot have an abundance of resources without stealing those resources from the future. And that's what they're going to learn, and we're all going to learn it. And the sad thing is the poor learn it first. The poor people are like myself are going to be the ones suffering first, and then eventually, in the long run, the rich people will finally have to come face to face with the consequences of their actions. But it's going to take a long time, and the rest of us are going to suffer on the way down. And for you rich people who think you're special, not necessarily all rich people, but especially those rich people who have real control over the levers of power in the world, one of these days you're going to get what's coming to you, and you're going to wish. You're going to wish that you weren't in such a huge rush to get all these resources out of the ground and into your mouths and around your dick and all this crap. One of these days, you're gonna realize that you've screwed your future generations, your next of kin, and maybe you don't care. Maybe you're just selfish assholes. But I'm tired of having to care for you, and at this point, it's hard for me to care. It's all going to hell anyway. Does it matter if I don't fly? Not really. I'm not gonna drive 5 hours to Southern California. I'm going the end of this month, and I'm gonna fly because what difference does it make? It's all going to hell anyway. I'll do little things here and there, but at this point, you're not really giving me the option. I wish I could take a bullet train to Southern California, but it doesn't exist. So what am I supposed to do? I wish I could take a bullet train powered by solar energy, but there's not enough solar energy installed, and you haven't made it affordable for people. So what are we supposed to do? You know. I wish I could do right by the world, but unless you're living out in a forest and totally outcast from society, you're not doing the right thing. And meanwhile, even the opportunity to live out in the forest is next to impossible because you own all the land. So how are we supposed to go live out? And what are we supposed to live in Yosemite? The ranger will find us and kick us out. So you're giving us no option at this point. We have to live like assholes, just like you do. I would like to use less resources than I'm using, but I have to do what I have to do, and I say, go to hell, you bastards. Soon enough, you'll realize the error of your ways. Maybe it won't be, in the next 50 years. Maybe even you won't realize it, but if you don't realize it, your kids will realize it, and I hope you're ready for that because. I hope to God that you at least get to watch your kids suffer before you die, and I hope you get to watch your kids turn to you and say, "Why did you do this to me?" Luckily, I won't have to worry about that because I'm not going to have kids because I know that nobody deserves to go through that kind of torture. But for you people, that will be a glorious moment in history. And it's almost worth all the death and despair and terrible things that are coming out, just so you can know that you were pretty much the primary cause of it, and the rest of us tried to do something about it and really didn't have any real power to change anything. That's just the truth. Sad but true.